The story I'm about to tell is not fiction. At least that's what I've been told by the people who survived it, and by the ones who refuse to speak about it anymore. What happened in that small town should have been forgotten, buried with the bodies and the silence. But some things linger, like rot under the floorboards. Claire Sanders never believed in ghosts. She was practical, down to earth, the kind of woman who laughed at horror movies and rolled her eyes at superstition. But when she moved back into her late parents' house, the place where she grew up, she began to understand why people warned her not to go back. It started small, the sound of footsteps in the hall when she was alone, the baby monitor, left in a box from years ago, crackling to life in the middle of the night, broadcasting muffled breathing though there was no baby, the doorbell ringing at 3:17 a.m., but no one on the porch, only three perfect muddy prints on the welcome mat that didn't match her shoes. Claire told herself it was stress. She'd just gone through a divorce, and her return home was supposed to be a reset, a chance to rebuild her life. She told herself the mind can play tricks when it's lonely, but loneliness doesn't explain the voices. The first time she heard her name whispered in the dark, she froze. It came from the corner of her bedroom, from the patch of shadow just beyond the reach of the street lamp glow. Claire. It wasn't her imagination. It wasn't her mind. It was outside of her. Real. She tried to laugh it off the next morning, but the sound echoed in her ears all day. By the end of the week, the voice was calling from different rooms, always just out of sight. Sometimes it was a whisper, sometimes a low murmur, and once, on the seventh night, it was her own voice, exactly hers, screaming her name from the kitchen. She ran downstairs, heart pounding, but the kitchen was empty. The back door stood open. That was when she called her brother. Claire, you need to get out of that house, he said immediately, after she told him. Don't you remember what Mom used to say about the knocking? Claire blinked. What knocking? There was a pause on the line, a silence that stretched too long. Then he said, Never mind, just lock your doors. And he hung up. That night, it came. 3 knocks, slow, deliberate, against her bedroom door, not on the front door, not on the walls, on the door just a few feet from her bed, separating her from the hallway she had walked down 1,000 times. As a child, Claire sat frozen, clutching the blanket to her chin, staring at the door. The knocks came again. 3. She wanted to scream, but her throat had sealed itself shut. Then came the voice, low, drawn out, her name spoken with a smile she couldn't see. Claire. The doorknob turned. The brass knob rattled, twisting against the lock. Claire hadn't locked it. She realized that with a jolt of terror. She never locked it. Why would she? It was her childhood bedroom, her safe place. The knob turned halfway, then stopped. Silence. Her heartbeat thudded in her ears, so loud she thought the thing on the other side must hear it. She gripped her phone on the nightstand, hands slick with sweat, but when she unlocked it, the screen glitched, flickering white static across the glass. The knob jerked again. This time, it turned fully. The door creaked open an inch, 2 inches, 5. The hallway beyond was black, too black, as though the light from her bedroom couldn't penetrate it. Who's there? She forced out, her voice trembling. No answer. Then, slowly, a hand curled around the edge of the door, pale, long-fingered, knuckles bent in a way that looked wrong, like the bones weren't in the right places. It gripped the doorframe, pressing into the wood hard enough to make it groan. Claire scrambled backward across the bed, knocking over the lamp. The bulb shattered, plunging the room into shadow. In the dark, she heard it step inside. Not one set of footsteps. Two, three, many. Stop, she whispered, more plea than command. Her phone buzzed in her hand. She looked down. An incoming call. From Claire. Her own name. Her own number. With shaking fingers, she answered. Static filled the line. Then, through the crackle, a whisper. Don't let him in. The phone went dead. Her eyes darted back to the door. It was wide open now, and the figure in the hall was stepping closer, each movement unnervingly slow, like it enjoyed her terror. She could see its face now, or rather, the absence of one. Where eyes should have been, there were hollows. Where a mouth should have been, only a faint slit curved upward in a smile too wide for any human. It tilted its head, and in her own voice, perfect and exact, it said, Claire, it's me. Open the door. But the door was already open. She screamed. Her scream tore through the house, bouncing off walls that suddenly felt too narrow, too close. The thing didn't flinch. It stood in the doorway, bent and crooked, watching her without eyes. Then, in a voice too familiar, it whispered again, Claire, don't you know me? Her body moved before her mind could think. She bolted off the bed, sprinted past it, and charged down the hallway. The floorboards creaked beneath her bare feet, every sound magnified in the silence. She didn't look back. She couldn't. The stairs yawned below her. She grabbed the banister and half fell, half ran down, crashing into the living room. Her hands fumbled with the locks on the front door, deadbolt, chain, handle. She yanked them all open with shaking hands. When she swung the door wide, there was nothing, just the quiet street under a pale moon. The night air cold against her sweat-soaked skin. For one brief moment, relief washed through her. Then, behind her, 3 knocks echoed. On the inside of the door she had just opened. She stumbled backward onto the porch, eyes wide. The door shut itself with a heavy slam, the sound reverberating through the frame. She tried the knob again, but it was locked from the inside. Her phone buzzed in her hand. Another call, same number, her own. She answered with a sob. What do you want from me? Her own voice replied, calm, cold, to come home. Static screamed in her ear. She dropped the phone. When she picked it up, the screen displayed a single message, written across the glass, as if carved into it. Let him in. Claire staggered back into the yard, staring up at the dark windows of the house. Movement flickered inside, her silhouette pacing back and forth across her old bedroom. But she was standing outside, watching herself. She pressed a hand over her mouth to keep from screaming again. The other Claire stopped at the window and turned to look at her. Same face, same eyes, same terrified expression. Then, slowly, it smiled, and the lights in the house went out. The street was silent. Not a dog barked, not a car passed. Even the cicadas had gone quiet, as if the whole town were holding its breath. Claire stood barefoot in the yard, staring at her own silhouette in the upstairs window of the house. Her reflection, or whatever it was, watched her with that same unnatural smile. The urge to run battled the terror that froze her in place. She backed toward the road, never taking her eyes off the window. Then the porch light clicked on. She flinched. The door creaked open slowly, deliberately, though she was certain she had locked it behind her. The shadows in the doorway pooled like liquid, spilling across the floorboards. And then a voice, her voice, called softly, "Claire, come inside." Her knees buckled. She wanted to scream for help, but the neighborhood around her was dark. Every house, lifeless, as if no one had ever lived there. Her phone buzzed again. She nearly dropped it, fumbling to check the screen. One new voicemail. Hands trembling, she pressed play. At first, only static, then breathing, slow, wet, deliberate. Then, her own voice again, whispering through the static. "Stop running. He's already inside." The message ended. The front door slammed shut. Every window in the house lit up at once, glowing with a cold, bluish light. Shadows moved behind every curtain. Dozens of them, maybe hundreds. Her breath hitched. She stumbled backward into the middle of the street. And then she heard it. Footsteps. Not from the house, from behind her. She turned slowly. At the far end of the street, something tall unfolded itself from the darkness, too thin, too long-limbed, moving with a jerking rhythm that made her stomach twist. Its face? No, it wasn't a face, just skin stretched smooth, with the hint of a mouth split into that impossible smile. It started walking toward her. Claire spun and ran. Her feet slapped against the pavement, cutting on gravel. But she didn't care. She sprinted past houses she once knew, but every one of them was wrong. Windows, bricked over, doors missing, trees dead and skeletal. Behind her, the footsteps multiplied, not one set, but many. The shadows from the windows were following. Her lungs burned, her chest heaved. She turned a corner and found herself back in front of her parents' house. The figure was closer now, the smile wider. Her phone buzzed one last time. She answered without looking, gasping for breath. Her own voice whispered through the speaker, "You can't leave. This is home." And then the line went dead. Claire's chest heaved as she stumbled back into the yard, gravel cutting into her bare feet. The house loomed over her, windows glowing with that sickly blue light, every pane filled with shadowy figures that moved in perfect sync. Her reflection no longer stood in the upstairs window. Instead, dozens of versions of her face peered out, some crying, some screaming, some smiling too wide. "No," she whispered, clutching her head. "This isn't real. This isn't—" But the air itself argued with her. The cold bit into her skin, too sharp, too cruel to be a dream. The smell of damp earth, of something rotting in the soil, filled her lungs until she gagged. Behind her, the footsteps grew louder, closer. She turned. Nothing. Then 3 knocks. Not on the door this time, not on the windows, on the ground beneath her feet. She staggered backward, staring at the soil. The knocks came again, rattling through the earth, vibrating up her legs. And then the ground split. A pale hand, long-fingered and twisted, reached out from the dirt, clutching at her ankle. She screamed and tore herself free, stumbling into the street. More hands clawed from the ground, stretching, reaching, grasping for her legs. She ran. Her body moved on pure terror, lungs tearing with every breath. She didn't know where she was going, only that she had to move. Houses blurred past. The street stretched too long, curving back on itself again and again. Finally, she tripped, crashing hard into the asphalt. Her palms scraped raw, blood smeared across her skin. When she lifted her head, she froze. She was back in her bedroom, Not outside, not in the street. On the floor beside her bed, the carpet rough beneath her hands. The lamp stood whole on the nightstand. The door was shut, the window open, moonlight spilling across the floor. Her phone buzzed once more. The screen read 01:17 a.m. She frowned through the tears blurring her vision. It had been hours. She had been running for hours. How could it still be the same night? A new message blinked across the phone screen. You let him in. Her stomach dropped. She hurled the phone across the room, shattering it against the wall. The pieces landed in the corner and then buzzed, all of them, vibrating against the floor. And from the dark, between the shards, a voice rose. Her voice. I told you not to. The bedroom door creaked. The knob turned. And this time, she didn't hear 3 knocks. She heard laughter. The laughter rattled the air, low and hollow, like it came from inside the walls themselves. Claire scrambled backward across the floor until her back hit the dresser. Her chest rose and fell in sharp, shallow gasps. The bedroom door creaked open an inch. Moonlight from the hall cut a thin blade across the carpet. She squeezed her eyes shut. It's not real. It's not real. Claire, her eyes snapped open. Michael, her ex-husband, stood in the doorway, wearing the same flannel shirt he used to sleep in, the same tired expression she remembered from years ago. Relief and terror collided inside her chest. Michael, she whispered. He stepped closer, hands out, palms open in a gesture of peace. It's me. You're safe now. Her body wanted to collapse into him, to believe him, but her mind screamed. Michael was states away. Michael hadn't been here in months. How did you get in? She asked, her voice trembling. His smile twitched. Too wide. You let me in. Her stomach dropped. She scrambled to her feet, pressing herself against the wall. You're not him, she said, voice cracking. The figure tilted its head, the smile splitting wider, stretching the skin until it looked like it might tear. I can be whoever you need. And then his face changed. Her mother stood before her, eyes glassy, lips trembling. Claire, it's cold out here. Let me in. Her knees buckled. She shook her head violently. No, no, you're dead. The figure shifted again, bones cracking, body jerking taller. Now it was her, an exact mirror. Her own face staring at her, smiling. You already did, it whispered. The shadows surged forward. The air thickened until breathing felt like drowning. Every object in the room vibrated. The lamp, the dresser, the bed, rattling louder and louder until with a deafening crack, the bulb in the lamp exploded, plunging the room into total darkness. Something touched her hand, long fingers, too many knuckles. She screamed and swung blindly, but there was nothing there. When her vision adjusted to the faint moonlight, she was alone, or so she thought. In the mirror across the room, her reflection did not move the way she did. It lingered, tilting its head, smiling that same smile. And in her own voice, it said, Now there's no way out. Claire's reflection grinned at her from the mirror, lips stretching wider and wider until it split her face like a wound. Claire staggered back, her spine pressing against the dresser. This isn't happening, she whispered. You're not me. But the reflection's mouth moved in sync with hers, mimicking the words perfectly, then twisting them. I am you. Her chest heaved. She grabbed the nearest object, a porcelain lamp base shattered from the bulb's explosion, and hurled it at the mirror. Glass cracked, but didn't shatter. The reflection's grin widened as the crack split across its face, jagged like another smile. Claire didn't wait to see more. She bolted for the door, yanking it open with both hands. The hallway beyond was impossibly long, stretching far beyond the dimensions of the house. Each door along the corridor stood slightly ajar, and behind everyone, whispers bled out. Her name, again and again. Claire, Claire, Claire. She sprinted down the hall, slamming each door shut as she passed. With every slam, the whispers grew louder. Her heart pounded against her ribs like it wanted out. Halfway down, she stopped. One door was wide open. Inside, dim fluorescent light flickered. She heard the hum of electricity, the soft buzz of static, and the ringing of a phone. She stepped inside. The room was empty, except for a payphone bolted to the wall, the kind she hadn't seen in years. It rang, shrill and insistent, echoing in the empty space. Her hand shook as she lifted the receiver. Hello. At first, nothing but static. Then, her own voice. You shouldn't have opened the door. Her blood turned to ice. She dropped the receiver, but it didn't fall. It hung in the air, pressed against her ear no matter how she struggled. Her voice on the line laughed, and then whispered, Look behind you. She turned. Every door in the hallway was wide open now, and in each doorway, something tall, thin, and smiling waited. Dozens of them. They stepped forward in unison. The figures stepped forward, their movements sharp, mechanical, too synchronized to be human. Their grins stretched wider with every step, teeth glinting in the flicker of the buzzing lights. Claire stumbled backward into the phone booth-like room, heart hammering, chest tight. She slammed the door, gripping the frame with shaking hands. The figures stopped just outside, their smiles unbroken, eyes black voids reflecting her own pale face. Then, slowly, deliberately, each one raised a hand. In perfect unison, they began to knock, not on the doors, not on the walls, on the inside of her skull. She clutched her head, screaming, as the knocking vibrated through her bones. The room spun, light stuttering faster and faster until the fluorescent glow melted into searing white. She fell to her knees, clawing at the floor. When the spinning stopped, silence dropped like a curtain. She opened her eyes. She was in her kitchen. The morning sun streamed through the blinds. The smell of coffee hung in the air. Her phone sat on the counter, buzzing with a notification. Her heart leapt. It's over. It was a dream. Oh, God, it was a dream. She grabbed the phone, tears welling in her eyes. The screen lit up. New message. 01:17 a.m. Her stomach dropped. She blinked. The morning sun outside flickered, freezing mid-beam, and then shattered like glass. Darkness poured through the windows, swallowing the room. Her phone screen glowed brighter, forcing her to look. A video file had appeared, playing automatically. It was her, in her bedroom. She watched herself sleep, tossing and turning, until the door creaked open and a tall shadow slipped inside. The video zoomed closer to her sleeping face, her mouth twitching in unconscious whispers. She heard her own voice on the recording. Don't let him in. The video froze. From behind her, in the pitch-black kitchen, a voice breathed against her ear. But you already did. Cold fingers brushed the back of her neck. She spun around and found herself staring into her own eyes. Her reflection stood inches from her, grinning too wide, its pupils bottomless black. The phone slipped from her hand and hit the floor. And in that instant, she knew the truth. There was no waking up. There was no morning. There was only a 1:17 a.m. forever. The kitchen stretched endlessly, the walls bending, ceiling lowering, floor rippling like water. Every object she knew, countertops, chairs, cabinets, was warped, twisted, familiar, yet grotesque. Her reflection grinned at her from every surface, mirrors, windows, even the screen of her fallen phone, all showing the same thing. Her face, distorted, grinning, eyes black as tar. The whispers returned. Not one, not two, but dozens, hundreds, all layered together. Too late, too late, too late. Claire screamed, clawing at the warped floor, trying to dig through reality itself. Her hands sank into the surface like soft mud. The shadows surged, rising from the floor, the walls, the ceiling, coiling around her legs, arms, torso. She thrashed, fighting, kicking, biting at the darkness. But it was infinite. Every movement pulled her deeper into it. Then she heard her own voice, clear, calm, almost comforting, echo through the void. You let him in. The words stabbed her soul. Her heart froze. She remembered the knocking, the whispers, the way the shadows had mirrored her parents, Michael, herself. It wasn't about escape. It never had been. The shadows coalesced into the figure she feared most. Tall, skeletal, smiling impossibly wide. Its limbs bent wrong, its face stretched and split like a cracked mask. Welcome home, it hissed. Claire tried to speak. Nothing came out. Her mouth wouldn't move. The entity leaned closer. Its breath was cold, metallic, smelling of rot and decay. It pressed a long finger against her chest, just above her heart. You are mine now, it said. Everything shattered. The walls, the floor, the ceiling. They dissolved. The town she had run through, the bedroom, the yard, the alley, all gone. Only darkness, only the figure. And Claire, suspended in infinite nothing, screaming silently, from somewhere far away, or maybe everywhere. The whispers continued. Don't let him in. But you already did. And then nothing. No sound. No light. No escape. Forever. Psychological horror. The first night it happened, Maya didn't realize it was the beginning. She had moved into the apartment 2 weeks earlier, a small, dimly lit studio on the edge of the city. Cheap rent, no neighbors who asked questions. Perfect for someone trying to disappear for a while. She told herself it was temporary, a hiatus from a life that had turned too loud, too demanding, too wrong. But the silence of the apartment had a weight, something oppressive about it. The first sign was subtle. Her front door, locked before she went to sleep, was slightly ajar in the morning. She brushed it off as forgetfulness. The second sign was less easy to ignore. Her laptop had been on her desk when she left for work. That night, she found it open, the screen glowing. A document she hadn't created, typed out in a font she didn't recognize. Lines of text, simple, but chilling. I know what you did today. I saw you. Her fingers shook as she reached for the keyboard. She deleted the document, told herself it was a prank, maybe a glitch, but the feeling remained. Someone had been inside, watching. The following days, the incidents escalated. Items moved. Books opened to random pages, her bedroom light flickering despite the bulb being new. And every night, The same sound. Slow, deliberate footsteps pacing across the living room floor. Her friends dismissed her concerns. It's an old building. Noise travels, they said. You're just stressed. But Maya knew the difference between creaking pipes and deliberate steps. She knew the subtle pause before the next step, the faint drag of a shoe. One night, she returned home earlier than usual. The apartment was empty, or seemed so. The documents on her laptop had multiplied, each screen filled with phrases, "You're alone," "You're mine," and that was when she heard it, the softest whisper, so close to her ear that she was certain it was her imagination. "You shouldn't have left the door unlocked." She spun. Empty. The room was still, but the air had shifted. The shadows were heavier, watching, waiting. She realized then, whatever this was, it wasn't supernatural. It wasn't a glitch. It was human. Someone inside, someone patient, someone meticulous, someone who had decided that her life, her very breathing, was now their project. Maya couldn't sleep. The apartment, once a haven of silence, felt alive. Every creak of the floorboards, every gust of wind against the window felt purposeful. She lay in bed, heart pounding, staring at the ceiling as shadows stretched unnaturally across the walls. The next morning, she tried to convince herself it was paranoia. Maybe she had been working too much. Maybe the city noise and isolation had broken her mind slightly. But as she poured coffee, she noticed her keys weren't in the usual spot. The knife she always kept on the counter, the one she used for chopping vegetables, had been moved. She didn't want to call the police. Who would believe her? No forced entry, no fingerprints, nothing stolen. It had started to feel personal. Over the next few days, her world shrank to the apartment. She stopped going to cafes, stopped answering calls from friends. Even work emails became a chore because every time she left her apartment, she felt a shadow trailing her, a presence just beyond her vision. Then came the letters. No stamps, no envelopes, just pieces of paper slipped under her door. On each one, meticulous handwriting spelled out phrases she couldn't ignore. "You are being watched. I know when you sleep. I know when you eat. You can't hide. I see everything." Maya burned the letters, shredded them, flushed them down the toilet, and still, the next morning, a new note appeared. One evening, she returned from work early. The apartment was darker than usual. The blinds closed, even though she hadn't touched them. She fumbled for the light switch. The moment the bulb lit, she froze. A single chair was in the middle of the living room, and on it, her laptop open. On the screen, a live feed from her own bedroom. Her fingers trembled as she stepped closer. The camera angle, low and precise, captured her bed, and there, in the grainy video, a shadow moved, standing, watching, waiting. Maya ran to the bedroom. Empty. Nothing there. The chair, the laptop, the notes, all reminders of someone inside her life, closer than she had ever imagined. The rational part of her mind wanted to scream, to flee, but the instinctual part, the part that knew humans, their logic, their cruelty, understood one horrifying truth. She wasn't imagining this. It wasn't luck. It wasn't coincidence. Someone had meticulously mapped her routines, her habits, her fears, and they had decided to make her life a living nightmare. The whisper came again that night, softer, almost intimate. "You can't leave. You belong here now." Maya pulled the blanket over her head. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She simply stayed very still, trying to disappear in her own apartment. Knowing the predator wasn't just outside, it was inside her walls, inside her space, inside her mind. The next morning, Maya woke to a buzzing phone, a text. "Good morning, Maya. Did you sleep well?" She stared at the screen, frozen. She hadn't given her number to anyone new. She didn't recognize the sender. Every rational thought screamed to delete it, block it, call the police. But the rational part of her mind had been suffocated long ago. What remained was a slow, icy dread. That evening, she decided to leave the apartment for a walk, just a short stroll to the corner store. Fresh air, rationality, light, something to reclaim her control. She locked the door behind her, checked the windows, double checked the locks, and still, when she turned the corner, she saw him standing across the street, leaning casually against a lamppost, face hidden under a baseball cap, hands in pockets, perfectly still. Watching, Maya froze, heart hammering. No, it can't be. Not yet. Not outside. He took a step. She ducked behind a parked car. He mirrored her movement. Panic surged. She ran. Every instinct screamed, "Don't look back." But she did. He hadn't run after her, just watched, smiling faintly under the brim of the cap. She reached the store, pretending to browse. Her hand shook as she picked up a bottle of water. Every sound made her flinch. Footsteps behind her, whispering from the street through the glass windows. "I see you. Always." Maya bolted back to her apartment. She didn't check for him again until she was safely inside. Door locked, blinds drawn, lights blazing. For a week, the texts continued. Short, unnerving, perfectly timed. "You went to the store today. I watched. You left your keys on the counter. I noticed. You looked at your reflection in the mirror. I saw you." Every message, a demonstration of control, of observation. Maya barely slept. Her mind frayed. Every knock at the door, every shadow under the streetlight made her jump. Every sound in the apartment, pipes, floorboards, the refrigerator humming, became a potential predator. She tried friends again, told them she felt unsafe. They nodded, told her to install cameras, maybe move out. They couldn't see it. They didn't understand it. They didn't feel the weight of someone so patient, so meticulous, so human, and so horrifying in their attention. One night, she tried a test, left her apartment, walked 2 blocks, ducked into a cafe, stayed an hour. No messages, no sighting. Relief, temporary. Returning home, she found the chair moved again, her laptop open on the counter, and on the screen, the exact view of her entering the building, every step, every moment, recorded, live. Maya understood now. There was no escape. He didn't need to chase. He only needed to watch. And she realized the worst part. He had always been there, patient, waiting for her to grow careless, waiting for the cracks in her routine, waiting until she knew she had nowhere to hide. By the 4th week, Maya had begun planning. Every detail mattered. Every routine was documented. Every creak, every shadow, every anomaly noted in a notebook she hid under her bed. She knew she couldn't call the police. They'd see nothing. No break-ins, no fingerprints, no stolen property. And anyway, the messages were too subtle, too psychological. The control wasn't about theft or violence yet. It was about terror, about watching her unravel, so she would fight differently. She installed cameras, cheap, inconspicuous, but he anticipated them. Each one was disabled within hours. Each one showed a perfect, calculated live feed. He knew exactly where she placed them. One night, she returned from a short trip to a convenience store and found the apartment rearranged, not ransacked, organized differently, everything out of place, yet meticulous. On the kitchen counter, a note in careful, precise handwriting. I like the way you tried. Maya felt rage and fear coiling in her chest. She was being toyed with, but now it was her turn. She decided to fight smart. She stopped her usual routines, altered her habits, left home at random hours, took different routes, yet every time the messages found her. I saw you take the subway at 6:13. I noticed the red scarf. Your haircut looks nice today. I watched you choose it. The precision was maddening. He knew everything about her. He knew how to touch her psyche, to break her without leaving a trace. Then, one evening, she returned home to find the doorknob slightly loosened. Her pulse spiked. The air smelled faintly of cigarette smoke. She hadn't smoked in years. Someone had been inside. While she was away, she backed into the living room, scanned for anything out of place, and then she saw it. A single photograph, framed and sitting on the coffee table. It was her, taken last week, outside the cafe. Taken while she sipped her coffee, pretending to be invisible. He had been there, watching, waiting. A note slipped under the frame. Smile for me, Maya. You look perfect like this. Her hands trembled. Her stomach knotted. Fear had been a constant companion for weeks, but now it was suffocating. She knew she couldn't run anymore. Not mentally, not physically. She decided to fight him where he was strongest. Psychologically, she would plant traps, mislead, leave clues, change her schedule daily, create false routines to lure him. But deep down, a terrifying thought gnawed at her. He was always one step ahead, always patient, always invisible, until he wanted her to see him. And she knew, with a sinking certainty, that patience was his weapon, and he had all the time in the world. Maya stopped sleeping entirely. The apartment became a labyrinth of anxiety and paranoia. Every shadow moved. Every sound became a threat. The stalker had turned her home into a cage, and her mind into a battlefield. She began to notice things she hadn't before. Subtle changes in the furniture. The blinds slightly shifted. Small scratches on the floor. She felt him everywhere, though she never saw him clearly. Every text, every note, every photograph had a purpose, to remind her she was being hunted without recourse. She decided to confront him directly. Not a chase, not a trap. She needed answers. She installed a second camera, hidden in plain sight, pointing directly at the door. Then she sat, knife in hand, waiting. Hours passed. Nothing. The apartment was silent. Then the phone buzzed. A text, short and precise. I've been inside while you sat there, waiting. Her stomach dropped. The calmness of the message, the certainty of his presence, was worse than rage. A soft creak. Footsteps. Maya rose, trying to keep her breathing steady. The lights flickered. She moved toward the sound, and then she realized it wasn't coming from the hallway. It was coming from inside the walls. Every panel, every seam, every corner vibrated faintly, as if the building itself had become an extension of him. She grabbed the knife tighter. The shadows shifted. The whispering started. Soft at first, then louder. You can't hide. I am inside you, Maya. Always. Panic surged. She ran to the bedroom, slammed the door, locked it. Her hands shook violently. She could feel his presence pressing against her. Not outside, not in the hallway. Inside, Then she saw it. The bedroom mirror, cracked but intact, reflected not her, but him, standing there, smiling, calm, watching. "You've been clever," he said. "I almost enjoyed it, but cleverness doesn't save you." Maya lunged, swinging the knife at the reflection. The mirror didn't break, the figure in the glass didn't flinch, and then, suddenly, the apartment seemed to fold in on itself. Walls stretched, floors bent, ceilings lowered, light and shadow collided into impossible angles. Maya's heartbeat thundered. Her breath came in ragged gasps. She realized, in that instant, that this wasn't just stalking. This wasn't just intrusion. He had become the architect of her reality. Every perception, every fear, every rational thought, all under his control. And the worst part, there was no escape. The whisper came again. "You tried to fight. I admired that. But the fight ends now." The lights went out completely. Silence. And Maya understood the horrifying truth. He didn't need to touch her, to destroy her. He had already taken everything. Her peace, her certainty, her mind. Maya sat on the edge of her bed, knife trembling in her hands. The apartment was silent, or at least it seemed silent. Every shadow clung to the corners of her vision. Every creak of the floorboards was amplified in her ears. The phone buzzed. Another text. "You're tired, Maya. Rest now. It won't matter." Her blood ran cold. He knew her exhaustion. He knew everything, every routine, every habit, every weakness. She tried to breathe, tried to focus. She couldn't leave. The streets outside were empty at this hour, and even if someone saw her, no one would understand the subtlety, the precision of what he was doing. Then the whisper, soft, intimate, like it was right behind her. "Come to me." Maya spun. Empty. The room had not changed, yet the air pressed against her, thick and suffocating. Her mind screamed, "There is nowhere to run." She bolted to the door, pulled at the handle, locked. She hadn't locked it, but it was now. The walls themselves seemed to pulse, bend, contract. Shadows pooled at the edges of her vision, forming shapes, human shapes, yet impossible. Their limbs too long, their heads tilting unnaturally. She backed into the corner, heart hammering, breath ragged. The reflection in the mirror caught her eye. Not her. Him. Calm, composed, smiling. "You're finally awake," he said, voice even, almost gentle. "I've been patient, but you must understand, I've won." Maya shook her head violently. "No, I can fight." He smiled wider. "Fight? You've been fighting your own mind for weeks. I merely guided the path, and now the path ends here." The shadows stretched. From them, figures emerged, almost human, almost real, but wrong in every way. The walls echoed with whispers. "You can't hide. You belong to me." She raised the knife. Every swing, every lunge was meaningless. The figures moved faster than thought, impossibly coordinated, always one step ahead. Panic swallowed her. Tears ran down her cheeks. She screamed, but her voice was swallowed by the room itself. And then he stepped forward, human now, calm, real, standing in front of her, yet somehow larger than life. "You see," he said softly, "I don't need to touch you. I don't need to hurt you. Fear, terror, isolation, that is my weapon, and it's already complete." Maya sank to the floor, knife falling from her trembling hands. She realized, with a sinking certainty, that this was the end. Her mind, frayed and exhausted, could no longer distinguish reality from his manipulation. He leaned closer, voice low, intimate. I've been inside your life, inside your thoughts, inside your fears, and now you are mine, completely. The apartment dissolved around her. Walls stretched infinitely. Shadows consumed the corners. Light fractured into impossible angles. She was alone, surrounded, everywhere and nowhere. And then silence. Absolute, suffocating silence. Maya understood. The fight, the fear, the obsession, the terror. It had all been his design. There was no escape. There never had been. She was trapped in her own life, under the control of a predator who existed not in flesh and bone, but in calculation, patience, and psychological domination. And she realized finally, with the coldest clarity, the mind is the battlefield, fear is the weapon, and she had lost.